A young boy takes care of endangered geese whose migration route has been destroyed and made dangerous by hunters. To make things worse, officials discovered that the geese have tested positive for bird flu, meaning they must be exterminated. But the boy refuses to give up. With a small ultralight aircraft, he tries to guide the flock toward a new migration path. Yet the journey is far from easy. Across the vast ocean, he must face a massive storm. What really happened, and why is this boy so determined to fight for them? This is the film Spread Your Wings.
One day in France, there was a boy named Thomas. He was a spoiled kid who spent all his time playing video games. No matter how many times his mom called him, he wouldn't come out of his room. Only when she cut off the internet did he finally obey. During breakfast, his mom told him that next month she had work out of town. So, starting tomorrow, Thomas would have to stay with his dad in the countryside. Hearing that, Thomas protested. Ever since his parents' divorce, he hadn't been close to his father. To him, his dad was a weirdo, obsessed with animals. In the middle of the conversation, his mom's boyfriend, who was also at the table, told Thomas to just go along with it. He was busy too and couldn't stay home to look after him. Just think of it as a vacation in the countryside, he said. In the end, Thomas reluctantly gave in. Meanwhile, at the National Animal Museum, Thomas's father, Christian, was meeting with the museum director. He explained that he wanted to conduct research on geese. Christian was a wildlife researcher. At that time, geese in France were endangered because humans had destroyed their migration routes. Christian wanted to try creating a new one. Unfortunately, the director didn't agree. He said geese weren't intelligent animals. No matter how much you tried to teach them, they wouldn't understand. Why approve a study that was bound to fail? Christian was disappointed. As he left the room, he ran into a female journalist named Diane, who was about to go in. At the front desk, Christian asked the director's secretary for the museum stamp. It turned out he planned to forge an approval letter. Since the secretary knew him well, she agreed to help. But to avoid getting into trouble, Christian would have to take the stamp himself. She then left the office with a colleague to get coffee. Once the place was empty, Christian quietly grabbed the stamp and left. Outside, Diane approached him. She was interested in his research and wanted to help, but Christian refused. Diane handed him her business card anyway and said, "If you change your mind, give me a call." That afternoon at home, Christian's friend Bjorn arrived carrying goose eggs. After transferring them to the incubator, Christian showed him the forged approval letter. Seeing it, Bjorn was overjoyed. He loved geese deeply and had spent years trying to get that authorization. At last, his dream had come true. The next morning, Paola and her boyfriend dropped Thomas off at Christian's place. Just as they arrived, Christian was outside wearing a strange outfit and dancing around. Thomas could only sigh in disbelief. Inside, Thomas immediately asked, "Do you have Wi-Fi here?" Christian replied, "Nope, I'm working on an important project right now, so I turned it off to make sure the radiation doesn't harm the animals. If you need to make a call, you can climb the tower out back." Annoyed, Thomas stormed into his room. Christian then introduced himself to Paola's boyfriend. He asked, "Why were you dancing in a robe just now?" Christian explained that the robe was specially made so the geese would see him as their parent. Paola and her boyfriend said their goodbyes. The next morning, while working, Christian grew upset at the loud noise coming from a nearby construction project. He worried the noise would prevent the eggs from hatching. While calming himself in the kitchen, Thomas complained that he couldn't stand living there. Too many mosquitoes and rats. Christian got an idea. He called the museum secretary and asked, "What happens if an endangered species is found at a construction site?" The secretary replied, "The project would likely be halted for 3 to 6 months. Christian smiled. That afternoon, Christian contacted Diane and told her he had seen droppings from a rare hamster near the construction site. He also explained his goose research. To ensure his project went smoothly, he asked Diane to report on the rare hamster so the construction would be shut down temporarily. As a journalist hungry for a story, Diane agreed. A few days later, Bjorn brought a newspaper showing the discovery of rare hamster droppings. The construction project was officially suspended. Christian felt relieved. The next morning, Thomas wandered into the storage shed where the incubator was kept. When he saw the goose eggs moving, he put headphones on them. Suddenly, one cracked. Panicking, Thomas ran to tell his father. When Christian checked, the eggs were about to hatch. Before the goslings emerged, he told Thomas to put on a robe.
Son premier regard sur nous. Écoute bien, regarde-moi ça. Viens, on va mettre là.
Day by day, the baby geese grew. Thomas, who at first hated being there because he couldn't play games, began to look happier than ever. He always wore the robe so he could play with the goslings. One afternoon, Christian showed Thomas a small ultralight aircraft. He planned to use it to guide the geese along a new route. Fortunately, there was a lake in the backyard, perfect for training. Unfortunately, Thomas wasn't allowed to fly yet because he was underage. Christian promised that on his 15th birthday the following week, he could try it. Excited, Thomas agreed. Slowly, father and son began to grow closer. One afternoon, while Thomas was playing with the geese, Christian came over and told him that he had just realized that one of them was a different species. He planned to take that goose to a special sanctuary. But Thomas disagreed. To him, they had all hatched together and were like siblings, so they shouldn't be separated. He went back to playing with the geese. Even though that goose was different, Thomas loved it dearly and named it Atka.
Allez, Aka, reste pas derrière. Aka! Tu me refais plus ça, hein? Oh là! J'ai déjà fait 3 tours!
Later that evening, Christian showed Thomas a map and explained goose migration. Their home was in France, while during the summer, geese usually migrated to Norway to lay eggs. When winter arrived, they returned to France and the cycle repeated. In reality, their natural habitat was Norway, but the winters there were too harsh, so they preferred France's milder climate. Sadly, their old migration routes had been destroyed by pollution and hunters. That's why Christian wanted to create a new route. His plan was to transport the geese by car to Norway, which would serve as the starting point. When the migration began, Christian would guide them with his ultralight aircraft from Norway back to France along the new route. If the geese memorized it, the project would be a success. Later, they would teach their offspring the same route. But if they failed to learn it, the research would fail too.
3 days later, Paola and her boyfriend visited Christian's house to celebrate Thomas's birthday. To prevent the geese from getting stressed, Christian asked them both to wear robes. In the backyard, Paola smiled when she saw her son happily playing with the geese.
Caca, caca, caca!
Vous vous rendez compte, elles ont 3 semaines! Va! Bravo!
That evening, while the 4 of them were having dinner together, Thomas enthusiastically told them about all his activities in the countryside. He also said with excitement that he would be joining the geese on their migration. Hearing this, Paola was moved to tears. The next morning, after Paola and her boyfriend left, Christian kept his promise and began teaching Thomas how to fly the ultralight.
Pousse un tout petit peu vers l'avant, pousse le trapèze. Qu'est-ce qui va se passer? Descends maintenant.
Days passed. Thomas quickly learned and was soon able to fly the plane on his own. He recorded every moment at his father's house and sent the videos to Paola. Finally, the big day arrived. Before leaving for Norway, Christian and Thomas took the geese to a sanctuary for a health checkup and to pick up Bjorn. That afternoon, Bjorn informed them that aside from health checks and giving flu vaccinations, he had also implanted GPS chips into the geese so their locations could always be tracked. The following morning, once everything was ready, their journey to Norway began. Day by day they traveled. Along the way, Thomas kept updating Paola. When they reached the Norwegian border, the head of the Animal Protection Agency told them that since they had brought animals from abroad, the geese needed blood tests first to ensure they weren't carrying diseases. They were told to wait by a nearby lake, and the geese were not allowed out of their cages until the results came back. 10 days later, Christian, Bjorn, and Thomas were still waiting, but the results hadn't arrived. Frustrated, Christian decided to release the geese anyway. Bjorn tried to stop him, but Christian didn't care. To him, it was better to train than waste time waiting. However, when training began, the geese refused to follow Christian's ultralight. Confused, he didn't know what went wrong.
J'en sais rien.
Moments later, several officers from the Animal Protection Agency arrived. Seeing the geese out of their cages, the head of the agency grew furious. That same day, the blood test results finally arrived, and they showed the geese tested positive for bird flu. Shocked, Christian protested. He argued that the geese had already been vaccinated, so there was no way they had bird flu. As the officers prepared to seize the geese, Christian fought back, begging for more time. Before things escalated, Bjorn suggested he call the museum director for help. But instead, Christian pulled Bjorn aside and confessed the truth, that he had forged the approval letter. Bjorn was stunned and deeply disappointed. Christian then told Thomas everything. Because of bird flu, the authorities might exterminate the geese. Strangely, Thomas didn't say much. Not long after, while everyone was distracted, Thomas secretly took off in the ultralight with the geese. High above the clouds, Thomas looked at the geese. He felt sorry for them. He couldn't let them be destroyed, but now he didn't know where to go.
Là-bas.
After gathering his courage, he decided to stick to the original plan, lead the geese across the new migration route back to France, passing through several countries. That afternoon, Christian and Bjorn were taken to the nearest police station. There, the head of the Animal Protection Agency only talked about the bird flu, ignoring the fact that Thomas was missing. In the middle of the heated debate, Paola called Christian. She explained everything. Panicked, Paola immediately packed and rushed to Norway. Her boyfriend tried to stop her, but she left anyway. The next day, after her plane landed in Norway, Paola went straight to the police station. She lashed out at Christian in tears, saying she regretted ever letting Thomas stay with him. Christian stayed silent, overwhelmed with guilt. Meanwhile, Thomas, who had run out of fuel, landed on a beach to rest. While playing with the geese, a little girl approached him. Since they didn't speak the same language, Thomas tried explaining through gestures. Luckily, the girl understood and took him to her parents' boat. They kindly gave him free fuel. When Thomas took off again with the geese, the little girl recorded a video of him and posted it on social media. Later that evening in France, Diane happened to see the post and immediately called Christian in Norway. When Christian, Paola, and Bjorn saw the video of Thomas flying with the geese, they were shocked but relieved he was safe. The next morning, Diane flew to Norway to meet them. She told Christian that she had requested another blood test for the geese. The results came back negative. They were healthy. Now, Christian, Paola, and Bjorn were released from the police station. After helping, Diane said goodbye since she had other work nearby, but told Christian to call if he needed anything. He thanked her sincerely. Christian, Paola, and Bjorn quickly set out to catch up with Thomas. Along the way, they tracked the GPS chips implanted in the geese. Based on the signal, Thomas was flying along the new migration route. That meant he was continuing their research.
On y la voit tout seul, peinard. C'est mon île.
Next, Thomas had to cross the Danish Sea. Paola grew increasingly worried, because the North Sea near Denmark was notoriously dangerous. Sure enough, as Thomas reached the waters, a sudden storm hit. The boy was terrified, but pushed forward anyway. Thomas and the geese managed to make it through the storm. When Christian and Bjorn saw on the GPS that Thomas had survived, they breathed a sigh of relief. Exhausted, Thomas landed on a pier to rest. He hadn't eaten since the day before and was very weak. Fortunately, a woman who had seen his viral video showed up, bringing him ice cream and free fuel.
The next morning, after resting, Thomas continued the migration. Day after day, he crossed country after country. Because his videos had gone viral, each time he stopped, locals gathered to cheer him on, take photos, give him food, and even offer fuel. Christian and Paola kept monitoring his journey. At one of the destinations, they arrived before Thomas. Not long after, he appeared with the geese. At first, they were overjoyed, until they realized Thomas had fainted in the cockpit as he landed. They rushed him to the hospital. The next morning, when Thomas woke up, Christian told him he had been unconscious for 20 hours due to dehydration. "Rest, son. The geese are in the sanctuary now." With a heavy heart, he explained that the project couldn't continue. From the very beginning, the research had never been approved. He had forged the documents. Christian apologized sincerely. Hearing this, Thomas was crushed. "If you want to give up on your own. I'll keep going until the end. If this new route works, then in the future, the geese will be able to migrate safely. Please help them. They're endangered. Why do humans only care about themselves and ignore nature? For days I fought through hunger, thirst, and even storms. No matter what happens, I won't quit." Christian was speechless, shaken by his son's words. The next day, Christian asked Paola to take Thomas back to the city. He knew his son would be disappointed, but the illegal project simply couldn't continue. At dawn, Thomas was discharged from the hospital, but when Christian arrived later that morning, he was shocked. Thomas was already in the air with the geese. It turned out Paola had secretly given him the keys to the ultralight and released the geese from the sanctuary. Smiling, she told Christian, "Our son has grown up. I just want to see him fly and succeed." Hearing this, Christian softened and decided to support Thomas instead of stopping him. Meanwhile, news of Thomas's journey spread everywhere and was broadcast on French television. The whole nation rooted for him. At first, the government wanted to forcefully stop him, but fearing public backlash and protests, they backed off. Finally, Thomas reached his final destination. Crowds of people gathered on the beach to watch him land. The mayor and several journalists were also present. But instead of landing on the beach, Thomas flew past everyone and headed straight for the lake near Christian's home. That night, everyone celebrated Thomas's success at a cafe near the house.
While they were enjoying themselves, the TV suddenly aired an interview with the museum director. He claimed Thomas's journey was pointless, that the geese wouldn't remember the new route. He explained that in the past, other researchers had tried guiding adult geese, but it had failed. The geese forgot the way and never came back. Hearing this, the mayor turned to Christian and asked, "Is what he says true?" Christian admitted, "Yes, but those were adult geese. They had two memories, the old route and the new one. They got confused and lost. But the geese Thomas raised were young, raised since birth. They have only one memory, the migration with Thomas. I believe this will succeed." 6 months later, migration season came. Christian, Paola, Bjorn, Diane, and Thomas all waited by the lake in Norway. By then, Paola and her boyfriend had broken up, and she was back with Christian. After a long wait with no sign of the geese, Thomas sat alone, disappointed. Just then, he spotted something flying over the lake. Looking through binoculars, he realized it was his geese. Overjoyed, Thomas shouted to everyone,
Papa, regarde! Papa, elles sont là! C'est elles! C'est elles!
Ça a marché!
Ça a marché! Ah!
They all cheered. Tears streaming down his face, Bjorn hugged Christian and said, "We did it! The geese made it! Your son made it!" This film reminds us that humans are not the sole rulers of the earth. Nature, animals, and all life around us also deserve their place. If we are brave enough to care and protect them, we are not only saving them, but also our own future. Thank you for watching until the end.